3 ingredients in enriching your marriage, or 3 things our grandparents had that we are losing to our own detriment. Number 1, marriage is an option. Divorce is an option. Our grandparents didn't think that way. Marriage was forever and ever, and that was it. Is divorce an option? If we think of it as an option, we undermine the sanctity and the permanence of what marriage is supposed to be. Marriage is supposed to be, by definition, a permanent, indestructible bond between husband and wife, which produces a family. In our grandparents, maybe our parents, but certainly our grandparents' generation, divorce was not an option. Not because of public opinion, not because it was shameful, although it did become shameful when it was so rare, but that was the result. The reason it was not an option is because marriage means, for better or for worse, till death do us part. Nobody said anything about divorce. Divorce is not an option. If you think about it the way your grandparents did, amputation is not an option. Sometimes it's unavoidable. But it's certainly not an option. It's not, people don't walk around thinking, oh, my arm hurts, maybe I'll amputate it. No, it's not an option. When amputation is necessary, then there is no option. It must be amputated. And when it doesn't need to be amputated, then amputation is a ridiculous option. Divorce is not an option. We don't live through our marriage thinking there's always a back door, I can always get divorced. That is not healthy. It drains the marriage of its vitality, of its strength, of its power. So, when you get married, when you are married, it's forever. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's the only way it's supposed to be. Our grandparents had that attitude, and we are slowly starting to lose it by making divorce such an easy and available option. It's not. Number 2, why marriage? Why must you be married? Marriage is not an option. You have to be married. You're supposed to be married. It's the only way God wants us to live. It's the way we always heard it should be, so we marry. This is not some kind of a convenience. It's not so that you can have someone you love living with you in the house. Marriage justifies itself for many reasons. Let's talk about just one. Without marriage, human beings wouldn't be quite human. Without marriage, we would still be cavemen. Without marriage, we would be barbarians. Marriage forces you to use every virtue known to human beings. Kindness, patience, consideration, humility, self-sacrifice, devotion. These are things that you might never get to use if you're not married. A waste of great human talent and potential. So the virtue of marriage is it demands all the other virtues. It makes you put to good use on an almost daily basis all the fine qualities that you're capable of. I once heard a man say to me in marriage counseling, you know, if we have to get divorced, it would be such a shame because I have so much love to give. Well, you're married and you're not giving it. Who are you saving it for? Marriage demands that you put your good talents, your good qualities to use regularly. It brings out the best in you. Now, obviously, it can also bring out the worst in you. But that's the truth and that's the nature of every good thing. Love is a wonderful thing. It can also be a terrible thing. Faith is a great gift. Faith can also be the most destructive thing in the world. Power works both ways. Marriage is very powerful. Use it right, it does wonderful things for the human beings, for the human race, and for the planet. It's good for children and other living things. So abusing it makes it doubly evil because the good potential that it has is such a tragedy when it's wasted. So is marriage an option? No, marriage is not an option. You have to be married for this one reason, because goodness would be wasted without marriage. Somebody once asked me, how come in Jewish tradition rabbis are encouraged to be married and have large families? He was comparing it to other religions where it's not so encouraged. And I thought, well, maybe it's because Jews like their rabbis to have some humility. And nothing brings out your humility better than a good marriage. Point number 3, the wisdom that our grandparents had that we are slowly starting to lose. And that is, what's in it for me? Our grandparents had a built-in, natural, native, organic sense of service. We are here to serve. We're here to contribute. We're here to make a donation to the welfare of the world. You know, today, young people are so inspired to save the planet, to save the spotted owl, to clean up the oceans. They're desperate for a role, some way to serve, some way to make a contribution on a bigger scale. That doesn't start with saving a planet. If you can't save your own relationship, then you don't have a firm basis on which to save the planet. Our grandparents naturally gravitated towards serving. Even at a very young age, 15, 16, they were ready to serve. They were not pampering themselves. They weren't looking for what's in it for me. They wanted to be part of something bigger, and the more it demanded, the better, because they had the talent and they wanted to use it. Today we think of talents only in terms of, let's say, Olympic performances, athletics, business. That's not the real talents. Those are gifts. The real talents are the qualities that make us human. Our grandparents couldn't wait to get on with the program or process of becoming human, of being more human, of using all those talents that make us human. So they weren't interested in being the best at anything. They wanted to do their best at what needed to be done. And in that way, they were all heroes. They were all heroes. And then communism came along. And suddenly they had a new devotion. They were going to save the world. And to some degree, family life suffered. Communism did not make the world better, but it did destroy family life. Simply by offering what seemed to be a higher, more noble calling. It wasn't. There is no more noble calling than marriage. A lifelong marriage that gets better with every year. That should be our goal. That should be our mindset. 3 things that made our grandparents' marriage healthy in a very unhealthy and difficult world. Now we live in a much more comfortable, healthy world, but our marriages don't have the richness, the texture, the warmth that our grandparents had. So, what were the 3 things? Divorce is not an option. It should never be mentioned. It should never be considered. A marriage is valuable enough to make every effort, to make every attempt at making it work, making it better. Of course, there are times when divorce is inevitable, like an amputation. In fact, God invented divorce. It's certainly not a sin or a shame. It's more a tragedy. So let's try to avoid those tragedies and not consider divorce an option. Number two, marriage is absolutely necessary, and therefore it is not an option. It must be. Because without it, we are barbarians. Without it, human qualities go to waste. And human qualities are a terrible thing to waste. And number three, you're not there to gain, you're there to make a contribution. You're there to serve. You're there to make somebody else's life better, easier, happier, richer. Now, if you have these three things, are your children going to love being home? I don't think so. In fact, we may run into a whole new problem. Grown-up children who don't want to leave home. But that's another story. So write in your comments, send in your questions. Let's keep the conversation going. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there is a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it.